Worship. I mean, to me, that's the epitome of awesome. So I appreciate it every time. I want to jump right in today. Though we're in the last week of this series, talking about a season, and we're going to be looking at the 15th chapter of the book of John in just a moment. It's right between the 14th and the 16th chapter. But last week, I really enjoyed talking about the Chronos and the Kairos. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should really go back and listen, take a look at that online. Anybody have a God moment this week just because you invited God in the moment, because you paid attention a little bit better? I can't see you. I'm assuming everybody's got their hands up, though. And if you don't know, again, you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen. But today I want to focus a little bit more on not just surviving a season. We talk about that sometimes. I want to talk about how we actually grow through these hard seasons. Because Jesus says this in John chapter 15. He said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. He says, you're already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me as I remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. And if you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. He says, if you don't remain in me, you're like a branch that is thrown away, withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. But if you remain in me, and my words in you, then you can ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." So he's kind of talking about from this gardening metaphor, which makes us think about seasons sometimes. I was kind of curious, what's your least favorite season of the year? I was having this conversation with somebody this last week. I heard somebody say mine. For me, it's most definitely winter. But I think hopefully you can understand that a little bit from my perspective, because I grew up in the South, right? So it's a little bit harder for me. I didn't grow up. I get all depressed. I get stir crazy when there's no leaves on the trees, right? And everything just kind of looks gray, and I can't get outside as much as I want. But in the South, people, it's almost like it's apocalyptic when things get below 50 degrees in South Georgia, and I'm not even really exaggerating. I know people like around here, we like to crash Hy-Vee whenever there's weather like this. We know snow's coming, but y'all don't know anything about cleaning out grocery stores and buying up all the milk when the rain gets a little bit chilly. That's what I grew up with. And I know it's true. Most people who grew up in the South have never lived anywhere else. If you've never done that, then you're going to come into something like this and have a hard time. I've got friends that live even farther north in places like Wisconsin and some of those crazy places. I don't know how they survive. But the thing is, I'm afraid that a lot of times we approach our spiritual life in a lot of the same ways. This word winter, like we use that word a lot of times to describe a hard season of any type, right? Whatever it might be. And I don't want to try to define what qualifies as a difficult season for you, because that's a really subjective thing. There are people in this room, there are people watching right now that have lost loved ones this last year, right? There are people in this room or watching who have cancer, who have other serious diseases right now in their bodies that they're dealing with. And as I speak, I'm talking to people who maybe have been without a job for a long time, or I might be talking to people who have a great job, and maybe your health is great, and you're surrounded by all your loved ones, but you also have this sinking feeling of anxiety and fear that you constantly battle as well. So I think it would be unhelpful for me to try to quantify what a difficult season is and what winter means for you. The truth is, everybody's sitting around you. Everybody you know is or will be going through difficult seasons that they'd rather skip. Though there's a strength in every season, we know if we choose to seize it. But we talked these past few weeks about how, we can't always choose our circumstances. And that's a hard truth sometimes to admit, even though we know logically it's true. We can't choose our season, we said, but we can always choose our response. That's the thing we have control over, is how I respond. And now, I've learned through a lot of years of counseling, caring for people going through hard seasons, that it's real easy for us to try to give reasons for struggles. Like, here's why you're going through this. And I think we do need to assume maybe some responsibility for our actions, some things we should learn from. We talked last week about sowing and reaping, right? There's some lessons there. You don't take care of yourself, yeah, you'll probably have some bad health. You overspend, then you're going to have a season of indebtedness. You might feel entrapped, But if we're not careful, especially as preachers, we can sometimes come across like, that people are to blame for things that they didn't cause. And we can do that sometimes in a way that makes you feel like we're guilting you into an agenda. I can't know all the reasons why God sometimes allows us to go through things that we go through. Honestly, that's even above my pay grade. We can speculate about reasons we might be going through stuff and hard times and learn from them and never still really figure it out. But we always have some level of choice in our response, how we go about dealing with it. So I want to try to teach you 3 things this morning as we wrap this up that I believe God does in a good way for us during these winter seasons in our lives. And if you determine, what winter means for you, it might be years, it might be days, but whenever you're in the middle of whatever that is, it seems like it's never going to end. It might be in your circumstances. It might be in your head. I don't know. But I think Jesus taught us a lot here in John 15 about weathering our winters. And you might be sitting, mentally on the beach today. Maybe things are great for you. I don't know. But I'd still encourage you to kind of keep some logs by the fire, so to speak, just to be ready, because you're going to need to know where to go and what to do at some point. But here's number 1 of 3. I believe that sometimes winter is a season of preparation. In a winter season, sometimes you just need to ask, okay, God, what are you preparing me for? Because we can't always know why something happens, but we can always look for what God wants to do through it. It's a discipline. It really means shifting the question from why to what. Not just why is this happening to me, but what am I supposed to be learning from this? What? I've learned this is again from a close friend who's going through just an incredibly tough, long, drawn-out season in his life right now. I remember him telling me that everything changed the moment he stopped asking why and started asking God what. It's not working out the way I wanted it to work out, and there's a lot of opportunity for him to become very bitter. And that why question only made it worse. I started asking what, he said, God, what are you preparing me for? God, what are you doing? Or many times, God, what are you preparing for me? Winter seasons are a good illustration of what we talked about last time. Seed, time, harvest. Seed, time, harvest. Because during winter, right, you can't see what's going on underneath the ground outside. If you only look at what you can see, everything looks lifeless. Everything looks gray. No fruit. But you give it time, we know that with spring comes new life. And what's happening underground that we couldn't see during the winter, there's life in that. And Jesus says in verse 1 of John 15, he's called God the gardener. Now I know where we sit, we're kind of on this line, it seems like in this region where, that way's a lot more urban. You go a little bit this way, it's a little bit more agricultural, right? Some of you guys grew up maybe around farming and things like that. Some of you know about farming. Others, I know people just think they buy organic foods and that makes them agricultural or something, right? Gluten-free doesn't automatically make you a farmer, right? But Jesus says, okay, my father knows how to grow stuff. He understands the process. So when you trust somebody that knows the process, your growth is in good hands. Even when, or especially when, you can't see what's happening below the surface. If the farmer tells you it's good, you can trust him. A season of blessing a lot of times be preceded by a season that seems barren, nothing going on. Why? Well, because, if you study some of this, in winter, the soil actually has a chance to rest. The soil gets to replenish. In winter, there's all these food and nutrients that are starting to be rejuvenated, even with what's going on below the surface. And without that process, year after year after year, all of those resources would just be used up. Spring wouldn't be spring. So if it's winter in your life, might it be that spring is soon to come? Might it be that these days are going to get a little bit longer? And might it be that there's hope about to spring up? In fact, let me show you this is one of my favorite running pictures. I don't stare at it too long because, some things you can't forget. Anybody say you're like old and busted? That's it. But I took this picture a while back because there's like for runners, it's more than just winning the trophy at the end of a race. There's a lot of other kind of cool trophies that we go for too, and this picture represents one for me. For like guys with a beard, that's not gray hair, that's icicles, right? That's like a trophy. That's a badge of honor. And, it shows that you went out and you toughed it out. But one of the great, I don't know if you can see this or not, one of the greatest trophies for a runner in winter is right up there beside my right eye. It's this little sweaty eyebrow sickle. And y'all don't understand how hard it is to run. Keep running with that little thing. And I'm just like, I got to get to the end so I can take a picture of this because it's really, really cool, right? It says something. You might not understand if you're not a runner, but like this is like the King Winter Trophy right here. I feel like Rocky going out ready to fight Drago, running through Russia or something like that. It made me feel good. It was worth going on. It was all of that because I got a few attaboys from the guys that run in Wisconsin and places like that. They didn't think I was just a fair weather runner anymore. I'm going to take that down. You don't need to look at that anymore. But you know what the best part of going out and facing some sub-freezing temperatures and running in it was for me? It made me stronger in the spring. Right, when the weather started getting a little bit friendlier and the morning started getting, just a little bit warmer, I had toughed out some bad stuff through the winter. It made me stronger. And let me tell you something about Christ followers who are consistent in their spiritual growth even when it doesn't feel good, even when the winter comes. Sometimes you just have to let people know. You just have to let the devil know. You have to tell yourself and remind your inner bully that if you're really going to pursue God's best for you in this journey, if you're not just talking a good talk, right? You're not just just relying on fair weather faith. If you're going to grow through the winter, then you got to remind yourself, I'm the kind of follower who's going to keep running in the cold. I'm going to train in the freezing rain. I'm going to trek through some ice and some snow because it's only making me stronger, right? And you just watch what happens when spring gets here. I'm in a season of preparation. I'm not just going to pray when I feel spiritual, right? I'm not just going to worship when I get those Holy Ghost goosebumps. I'm not just going to serve when people can recognize me. I don't just give when I've got excess. I show up in the cold because I know it's in those cold months. God's doing something in me underground to prepare me for what's ahead. And listen, I understand that my trying to encourage you in this, it doesn't necessarily just take away your pain or the struggle you're feeling, but maybe together with God's help, you can find some purpose in the pain. That's what keeps us going, right? If you can say, God, in this season of loneliness, God, in this season of lack, in this season of failure, God, with that empty chair this year, I wouldn't have chosen any of that, but I'm choosing my response. I'm choosing to trust you, and I want you, God, to prepare me in this season, and I'll trust you until spring comes, whatever that is. Here's number 2. I think winter can sometimes be a season of pruning. Jesus uses this word. It's not a word we use a whole lot unless maybe you are a gardener. But if you don't read this carefully, though, you might even miss the real truth of this. I want you to look again at verse 2. Jesus said, He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He allows to keep on growing on its own, right? No. Every branch that bears fruit, He prunes so that it'll be even more fruitful. And I don't think this hit me as much as it did when I'm kind of thinking through teaching this, but it's almost kind of funny because as Jesus says, okay, if I don't bear fruit, then, I don't stay vitally connected to Him. I get that. I don't have a source, right? I get cut off and I dry and I wither up and I get thrown away. If you do stay connected to me, He says, and if you do bear fruit, I still get cut back, right? I mean, here's why I have to kind of laugh at that. Either way, you get cut. Either way, there's a pruning. And some of you I know have been hurt by this brand of religion out there that somehow teaches that if you just sow good seed, then you never get cut. You just sow your seed of faith, there's always going to be this great thing happen to you. Being a good Christian means nothing ever goes wrong. That belongs to God means, the belonging to God means no one close to me is ever going to suffer. And maybe you have a different version of that explains it differently, but the way I read it, okay, he says if you don't bear fruit, you get cut. If you bear fruit, you get cut. Okay, but here's the important truth I want you to write down. Here's what he's getting at. It's much better to be cut back than to be cut off, right? I'd rather know that I'm still connected to my source in a season of struggle, in a season that I'd rather skip, than to have to try to walk through that season without him. If I'll continue to trust him, if I'll stay connected to him and learn the hard lessons, if I will allow him to prepare me, I will bear the fruit. I will. And then he will prune me. And pruning isn't pleasant, but pruning has a purpose, right? That's what keeps us going. I know there's a purpose in this. Pruning has a purpose. I bought an autobiography. I don't read a lot of autobiography. I can't even say it. That's why I don't read them. Autobiography. But I should read them more because there's a lot of lessons. I bought this one about Nelson Mandela, and I don't know if you've ever studied him or read his story. But this one book I bought was like this collection of a lot of different interviews and reflections people had about him because I find his story inspiring. Can I just read just a few sentences from one of the authors in this book that really, really struck me? This particular author said, Nelson Mandela had many teachers in his life. He said, but the greatest of them all was prison. Prison molded the man we see and know today. He learned about life and leadership from so many sources, but the 27 years he spent in prison became the crucible that both hardened him and burned away all that was extraneous. He said prison taught him self-control, discipline, focus, the things that he considers essential to leadership, and it taught him how to be a full human being. Now, I had to read that 2 or 3 times because at first I was like, oh, that sounds really good, but how does prison make you a full human being, right? So he asked, how did this passionate revolutionary become a measured statement? In prison, he had to temper his responses to everything. There was little a prisoner could control. Right? The one thing you could control that you had to control was yourself. All right? He's talking about responses here. There was no room for outbursts or self-indulgence, lack of discipline. He had no zone of privacy. When I first walked into Mandela's old cell on Robben Island, you should Google and kind of take a look at this. He said, I gasped. It's not even a human-sized space, much less Mandela-sized. He couldn't stretch out when he was lying down. It was obvious that prison had both literally and figuratively molded him. There was no room for extra motion or emotions. Everything had to be pruned away. Everything had to be ordered. 27 years. Over and over, he says, I asked him how prison had changed him and how was this man who came out in 1990 different from the man who entered in 1962. The question annoyed him. He either ignored it, went straight to a policy answer, or just denied the premise. Finally, one day he said to me in exasperation, get this is what he said. How did prison change you? I came out mature. Those were Nelson Mandela's words. I came out mature. So this author said, to me, those 4 words are the deepest clue to who Nelson Mandela is and what he learned. Came out mature. Now, I don't know. You might be going through a season right now that's a prison of sorts. Maybe not a physical prison, but there are circumstances that make you feel confined. There's this ongoing just sense of I don't know what's next, right? That just kind of feels like it's got its arms around you. Have you feeling little hope? And you wouldn't choose this. And I know it's really easy for people to try to encourage you, and I know their motives are good, and they'll say something like saying, hey, you'll get through this. You'll get through this. You're going to make it. And I know they mean well, but it can be annoying because I know I'll get through this. Every circumstance has been bad for me before. I'm still here. I got through them. And that's true for most things in life, with few exceptions. And so it's not annoying to me just because I know I'll get through this. It's annoying because I want to know there's a purpose to this. And when I don't see the purpose, that's when it bothers me. I want to get something out of this. We don't grow just simply by surviving seasons. We don't grow by hurting just to get hurt and get over it. But if God is the one who's in control of the pruning, like Jesus is teaching us here, I'm not just going to make it through this. I'm going to come out of this stronger, more productive, more fruitful, and more mature than when I went into it. It's going to strip away some stuff. There's some purpose in this. I can't always choose my season, but I can choose my response. And so Jesus replies, listen, if you're going to get cut regardless, The key is to remain. He says that over and over and over again. Remain in me. That's the key to getting pruned and not losing your mind, not losing your faith. Remain in me. That's the key to living through a tough season and growing. He doesn't give us 15 tips on how to survive an emotional avalanche. Listen, okay, it's hard. He's talking to his disciples when he says this. And they were about to go through something that they couldn't even imagine yet as he was teaching this. John 15 is actually at the start of something we sometimes call the last discourse. Like this is the last time Jesus had a chance to try to prepare his disciples for his departure. And their world is about to get rocked. Everything they thought is about to change, right? It's going to be a winter like they've never experienced. But he tells them, before I go, okay, before you're tempted to deny me, before you see me suffer at the hands of wicked people, before you see me hung on a cross, I got one more word for you. One last teaching for you. Remain. Remain, remain. And some seasons can be really, really difficult. The survival sometimes feels like success, right? So he says, just remain. You don't always have to be in a great mood about it, but remain, right? You don't have to always know every answer. You can have some doubts and some questions, and the outcome might be cloudy, but just remain. I mean, I don't know, is this hitting anybody like it hits me? Stuff's coming against you. It hurts. I mean, you feel like I'm getting cut. What do? Remain. Hold. Stay, trust, remain in me, Jesus says. Remain. If you don't leave, you can't lose. No fruit on the vine yet, just remain. Right? No love in the house right now, just remain. No feeling in your heart, just remain. No clear direction in sight, no next step, just remain. If I'm going to have to go through this, I want to know I'm going to get something out of it. But I can't know. I'll never know if I don't remain. I can't get something from it if I don't go through it. Some things in life, I just can't go around. I have to go through it. Solomon once wrote, the fastest runner doesn't always win the race, right? The strongest warrior, he said, doesn't always win the battle. The win comes to those, he said, to those who remain until the end. Last one standing. Remain. Somebody needs to hear that right now. God's preparing you for something, which means he might have to prune something from you. He might have to burn something away. Why? Well, here's number 3 real quickly, because he wants to prove something to you. Winter is a season of proving. God will often choose to use someone through whom he can prove his faithfulness through these seasons. You might be going through a cold, dark season of life, but that puts you in a great position for God to prove something to you if you'll allow him. There's a purpose if you'll trust him. One of my favorite quotes, it also happens to be a song by Switchfoot, but it simply says, the shadow proves the sunshine. To me, that's pretty deep. The shadow proves the sunshine, right? There's a purpose to be proved, but it's all about your perspective. Now, God is a good father. Jesus teaches us that, and he would never, I don't think Jesus would, or God would ever send his children as a good father into a situation just to hurt them. And I don't believe God has any interest at all in just simply punishing you. And God doesn't do things just to mess with you and just to test you all the time or just to put you on display as a bad example for others to see and avoid. That's toxic religion. He wants to prove himself to you. Doesn't just want to use you. And I can't help but think about the story of Job. You remember back in the Old Testament, it's always given me some fits. But as I get older, as I go through more junk, as I wrestle with God more honestly about my own faith, Job's a hard book for me to understand. It raises some big questions. Some will say it's a literal account. Some say it's like a fictional story. And honestly, I don't know. Either way, I believe the inspired message is the same. It's trust me, God says. You're going to have to trust me, remain in me no matter what. But if you're not familiar with the story, okay, the devil's given access to God somehow, and he asked God if he could go mess with this man Job. And the devil says the only reason he's serving you is because you've been so good to him. Anybody would do that, right? Let's put some hardship on him and see what he does. You take away his wealth, his reputation, and his family, you're going to see he's just like everybody else, right? He's not serving you from a sincere heart. He's only serving you because you're giving him stuff. And the story goes that God, okay, actually gives the devil permission. He says, all right, really try it out. Let me know how it works for you. And the devil did his worst to Job. He almost lost everything, right? His children, his livelihood, his health, almost everything dear to him. Interestingly, though, you read the story, one thing he didn't lose was his wife. And if you read about his wife, it's almost as if the devil left her there on purpose because she's just hard, right? I mean, she's just an agitator. Just read it for yourself. She's evil. And there's a side point to that, I think, too, that the devil kind of knows where to hit you and knows where your hard spots are. He'll take some people out of your life. He'll leave some other people in. And both can feel like punishment sometimes. But this whole story of Job is with him and his friends trying to figure it out. And it's why? But in spite of all the things about the book of Job I still don't understand, have questions about, it comes to a point which I believe is the main purpose of the entire book, whether it's fiction or not. Job comes to a place where he says this. I think this is awesome. He says, my complaint today in this season is still a bitter one. I don't like it. I'm not saying I'm good with it at all, right? And I try hard, he says, not to groan aloud. I'm trying to be positive, but I can't. That's the honest truth, he says. But he knows where I'm going. Talking about God, his good Father. He knows. And when he tests me, I will come out as pure as gold. It's like, okay, although God may have not caused this testing, and this may be true for you too, God didn't bring it on, but God is allowing it for some reason. He did allow a season of testing because he knew Job was someone who would prove his faithfulness. God had a point to prove through the story of your life too. He wants to prove that the light shines brighter than the darkness, but you can't do that unless there's darkness. And if you're going through something right now, you can't always know why. But I hope it's encouraging to at least realize I don't necessarily have to know all the whys to choose to trust. Like, here's my response. If I'm going to get pruned, I'm going to produce. That's my choice. Look again at verse 8. This is to my Father's glory, said that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. All right, here's our great privilege. When you allow God to prepare you, when you willingly go through the pruning, then he gets to prove to you in ways that he couldn't otherwise that he is strong, that he is glorious, that he can be faithful through you and to you. You get to bear the fruit of his glory. You get to show a watching, skeptical world out there what real peace looks like, right? You get to show what real happiness can look like. How true fulfillment is meant to be experienced, not just talked about, right? And deep in your soul, that's what you want more than anything else, is a real experience with God. That's the bigger story you were created to live. I'm choosing to receive God's preparation. I don't know why, but I do know what. I know what the purpose is, and I'm choosing to remain in him as I go through this pruning. I'm not going to just throw it in. I'm not missing spring because it's just getting a little bit cold out there right now. I'm choosing to be a conduit of God's glory to a watching world because he's doing something in me. He's doing something through me. Would you just bow your heads with me for just a moment? I want you to take just a moment as we close this morning to try to get as honest as you can with God, whatever that looks like for you. I just want you to try to listen to those whispers in your own heart and ask God, okay, what do you want me to hear from this? What do you want me to do with what I've just heard? And listen, we know if we don't remain, if we don't, there's danger in that. But if we do, spring is not far behind. So ask God to give you the strength to remain. Don't quit. Don't just give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on God. Don't give up on that marriage. Don't give up on that idea, that dream that God put in you. Don't give up on the service God has assigned you to. I know it gets cold. I mean, that's why God puts people around us. Don't give up on the people around you. Father, I just pray that you would speak life to those who may feel empty today. God, I pray that you would speak meaning to those who are struggling to find purpose, to even know what their next step is. God, I pray that today at the very least we know the next step is to remain, to not give up, to not throw it away. God, to trust you in the moment, knowing that there is a purpose to it. And God, I know that's a big leap for some. It's easier said than done. So God, I just pray that you would speak to our hearts and our souls through this season. Help us to know that there's growth and trust you for that. And we look forward to it. We pray for it to come quickly. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Life Point, that is it for today's service. Thank you so much for coming out. We're glad that you are here to listen to this teaching. And remember, you were created for a bigger story. One of the easiest steps you can take to live that bigger story is to come back here next week and join us for our series. Bring a friend. Let's look into our at-home series next week so we can see how we've been helping or hurting our relationships throughout the past year. We're also going to tell you what you can do about it now and give you some practical tips to help out. Thanks again for coming. We'll see you next time.